Hi all, welcome back to the John Deere B tractor restoration. Still not much happened to the chassis, but things are progressing, and at the moment on the bench we have the basically we have the oil pipe system for feeding the bearings and the pressure relief valve. That part there being pressure relief valve, and obviously the associated pipe work that goes with it. That big long bolt coming down from the bottom, that's where your oil filter, when that's installed in the tractor, that bolt obviously hangs down inside the oil filter housing, and you push the oil filter up, that sits inside the oil filter, and then that cup shaped part that you can see from underneath the tractor screws onto those threads. The pipe work is pretty well what you see there. I think you'll find that design of pipe work in both the Model A and the Model B. Obviously this is the Model B. Generally the pipes are all made out of copper, although I do have a steel pipe on this one. This is a steel pipe. For what reason, I don't know. Certainly the last one I did, it was copper. The crankshaft runs through, obviously through this area, and it can run very tight to some of those pipes. And if this pipe is maybe just slightly got bent or put in slightly misaligned, the crankshaft could have been touching it and worn a hole through it, and so it's been replaced with a steel one. So I don't know. So basically then you've got your, as I say, you've got your oil pressure relief valve here. That has two functions. One, it regulates the oil pressure from the pump, because obviously the pump will just pump and pump and pump, and so inside that is a spring and like a flappy valve, which is regulated by this nut and threaded bolt here. Idea being that it puts pressure on the valve, on the flappy valve piece, and in turn puts pressure on the spring, and so it only allows it to open so far. The other thing that the pressure relief valve does is that if perchance your oil filter becomes clogged, and so when you start the engine the oil can't go through the oil filter, there is another valve in there which allows it to bypass the oil filter, and so it's never starved of oil. Though I've got to say, once your oil filter's plugged with thick gooey oil, then it's A, time for an oil change, and B, the damage is probably already being done to the engine. The pipe work, basically that pipe there comes off here down into here. That comes from the top of the oil filter, the oil pump. So that is the main pressure feed to the relief valve and to the various bearings, barring one pipe which we'll come back to in a minute. This pipe here comes out and goes up to the governor, and that pipe feeds the governor. It feeds the little spray hole that sprays oil onto the gears and onto the governor bearings and the governor weights, etc. That little pipe there, it feeds the camshaft. Now it feeds one bearing on the camshaft, one side. Now the camshaft is hollow on these, and so the oil flows from that bearing, across through the camshaft, which would be there, to another bearing on this side, and that lubricates the other bearing. The two pipes here are the mains bearings feeds. So that feeds the mains bearing first, and then via drillings in the crankshaft it feeds the left hand big end bearing, and conversely this one does the same. It feeds the other main bearing, and through the drillings in the crankshaft it feeds the other big end bearing, and eventually obviously the oil is then forced up the connecting rod to feed the little end bearing in the piston. Now, as you can see, I've polished this one up. Now that isn't, I know you're going to say, well, you're never going to see it inside the crankcase, but it's worth just cleaning these pipes up because they are prone to fracturing. We can get little hairline fractures in them. I don't know why. I think it could be the age that they are. And also on the ferrule, this piece here where the ferrule's soldered onto the pipe, that solder there can eventually get old and fracture as well. I think it's the vibration in the engine that does them in. I've only ever found it once on one of these ferrules on a track, one of my first tractors I did, and I knew it had cracked the solder because when we took it apart, the pipe just fell out the end of the ferrule. So now it's worth cleaning them all up like that. I just used a wire brush on the bench and a bit of emery cloth. So yeah, there we go. I'll do all the rest of them, check them all over, and then we'll install it. I said at the beginning of the video, or into the video, that that everything was lubricated from pipe work off the relief valve. Well, in fact, that's not strictly true because there's another pipe here. You can see it there. Now that pipe actually comes off directly off the top of the oil pump, which is going to be down here somewhere, and that actually feeds a pipe that runs through the block, or a tapping that runs through the block, and forces oil up to the tappets on the cylinder head. And the oil comes out of that hole there on the cylinder head. There's a funny shaped piece of casting which allows it to come out, and that then eventually feeds all the tappets via some more pipe work in the top of the cylinder head. I had someone comment the other day regarding oil feed to a cylinder head. He was wondering how it worked, whether it come off a governor pipe. It doesn't. It comes off the top of the oil filter, the oil pump. Sorry, oil pump. Obviously, the designers of the day thought that the tappets did not require filtered oil. Hey, who am I to argue with them? So that's that. The pressure relief valve, I will take to bits and just give it a good clean out. Although I have pressure washed them all out and they've been in petrol and everything, so they should be clean. Now, interestingly, as you will see, the pressure relief valve has a flat surface here. This surface is all flat, and that bolts down onto the top of the filter housing, which I'll show you in the tractor. So if we can get the light in there, there we are. So there's the filter housing. That oh dear me. See if we can get this without. How am I going to do this? So that's your filter housing. This thing here. Now, as you can see on that filter housing, it all looks a bit beat in on the top. And the problem is, and it's on every one that I've taken a bit, is that what happens is when you change the oil filter, and it doesn't always just quite seal from underneath, people have an inclination of over tightening that nut on the bottom of the oil filter. And what happens is it forces, because that bolt is fixed to the top of the bottom of the pressure relief valve, the pressure relief valve eventually starts bending into that housing and deforming it. And what happens is you start to lose oil pressure, because obviously that flat surface of the pressure relief valve does not fit square on top of that oil filter housing. So what you need to do is get a flat piece of steel and put it across the top of the filter housing, and from underneath you need to get a nice flat bar and just tap it all up square. Now, you can't get it 100%, but you can certainly make it better than what we have in that situation, and it improves it tenfold. So if you take your filter cap off the bottom of the tractor and pull the oil filter out, and you notice that when you push the oil filter in, it doesn't seem to sit square in the bottom of the oil filter, in the bottom of the filter housing, and the cap on the bottom doesn't seem to fit square with the hole, etc. It's because I'll put money on that the top of that filter housing is bent and distorted, and that's where you lose oil pressure. Now generally why people over tighten them, going back over to the bench, is because that they replaced the filter, but they haven't replaced, here it is, that black O-ring that fits in the bottom of the tractor. And generally that black O-ring is either missing or it's just dried out and it's generally knackered. And what you need to do is get that fresh O-ring in, put that in the bottom of the tractor, put your oil filter back in, put the cap, the oil filter cap back on. I just can't find mine at the moment off this tractor, it's about somewhere. Tighten it all up, but you don't have to over tighten it because it's a new seal, and you can get that seal. You can get it. It's only in the UK. It's only pennies in the UK. That's the part number there. I hope that can be readable. It's A519R. So renew that seal when you do your oil filter changes, and you will not distort that filter housing. As you can see it's a ferrule bolt, and it just pulls this. It just distorts it all by pulling this pressure relief valve, tightens it all up, and it distorts everything, you know. And the way I found out, the first time I ever found out that was a problem, was the first one I ever changed the oil on, and it didn't seal right, and I was thinking, oh, I should have bought a new oil seal, that new oil seal ring. And of course, when I started up again, my oil pressure had disappeared. There was hardly any oil pressure. And so when I took it all to bits, I realised what I'd done. Although it had already happened, I hadn't done it totally, but I distorted the top of that oil filter housing. So yeah, so there you go. So we'll get that put back in, and then the idea is, once that's in, I'm pretty sure we can start thinking about dropping the crankshaft into these two big holes. And then once we get the crankshaft in, yeah, we can get things like con rods and pistons put in, so that'd be great. So, anyway, I've rambled on enough. Thanks again all of you for watching the videos. I'm glad you're enjoying them. So yeah, anyway, we'll bash on. Thank you very much. Bye now.